It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but within moments, it became a nightmare no one could explain. The morning of June 14th had started like any other for Claire Whitman. The sun poured through the windows of her suite at the Rosewood Manor, illuminating a room filled with white satin, fresh flowers, and a palpable sense of excitement. Her bridesmaids buzzed around, helping her into the dress that had cost more than some people spent on an entire month's rent. Laughter mingled with the soft strains of a string quartet rehearsing in the adjacent hall. Claire's groom, Daniel, was waiting at the altar, nervous yet radiant. Friends and family had arrived from near and far, each dressed to perfection. From the outside, it was the quintessential fairy tale wedding, a day that would be remembered for love, laughter, and blissful beginnings. But behind the perfect veneer, small things began to unsettle the air. A guest noticed that the florist, a new hire named Lena, kept glancing nervously at the doors. Another noticed the caterer wiping his brow even though the ballroom air conditioning was set to a crisp, cool temperature. A few whispers floated, nothing concrete, but the day seemed slightly off. Claire herself felt a twinge of unease as she walked down the grand staircase. Something was nagging at her, a sensation that made her chest tighten. She pushed it aside. Today was supposed to be about love, not fear. The ceremony went off without incident. Vows were exchanged, rings slipped onto fingers, kisses were shared, and applause filled the grand hall. Guests moved on to the outdoor terrace for photos and cocktails. Daniel, still beaming, suggested they take a few moments alone before the reception began in full. Claire agreed. She stepped out into the rose garden, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the meticulously groomed paths. The sweet scent of blooming roses mingled with the faint tang of smoke drifting from a distant corner of the estate. She paused, glancing toward the source, just a wisp of gray curling from behind a hedge. It was subtle, easily overlooked, but something in her gut screamed that she should not ignore it. Just a candle, maybe? She murmured to herself. Claire wandered closer, curiosity pulling her through the garden. The air was unnaturally still, and even the birds seemed silent. Then, without warning, a flicker of flame appeared at the corner of her vision. She stepped forward, and the fire leapt higher, an unnatural surge of heat and smoke. Panic rose instantly. She called out, expecting someone nearby to help, but no one answered. Her heels clicked against the cobblestones as she backed away. Then, before she could take another step, the fire engulfed the small clearing, twisting and surging like a living thing. The smoke stung her eyes, the heat burned her skin. Claire turned to run, and vanished. Witnesses later described the scene in disbelief. Guests screamed at the sight of flames curling around the hedge, smoke suffocating the air, but there was no bride to be found. No dress, no hair, no hand reaching out for help. Nothing but the fire and the chaos it left behind. Police arrived within minutes, though by the time they reached the garden, the flames had already died down. Firefighters worked to extinguish the remaining embers. Claire's absence was immediately noticed, and panic spread like wildfire through the guests. Detective Marcus Hale, a seasoned investigator with 2 decades on the force, was called to the scene. He had seen many unusual disappearances, but nothing quite like this. The garden was scorched in a small patch, enough to suggest that something had burned, but curiously, no body was found. Not even traces of fabric from her gown. The detectives interviewed the guests, but everyone had a clear alibi. The caterers, the musicians, the photographers. No one had seen Claire leave the terrace. No one had touched the garden where the fire erupted. Security cameras covering the garden had inexplicably malfunctioned during the critical 20 minutes of the event. Something about the entire scene felt impossible. A single, charred object was found near the hedge, a delicate silver locket belonging to Claire. It was intact, almost untouched by the fire. Inside was a photo of her and Daniel, smiling at their engagement party. Why had the fire spared it? Further searches of the surrounding estate revealed strange scorch marks that didn't match normal fire patterns. They seemed deliberate, like the fire had been controlled, almost as if it was guided by some invisible force. Hale's team also discovered footprints leading away from the garden, but they were odd, too large for Claire, yet too light for someone carrying an adult bride. And then came the whispers among the staff. The new florist, Lena, had been seen wandering alone near the garden prior to the ceremony, muttering something about the bride not being ready. Neighbors reported seeing a shadowy figure at the perimeter of the property moments before the fire. No vehicle, no face, just movement. A silhouette that vanished when approached. Speculation ran rampant. Had Claire staged her own disappearance? Could someone have abducted her in a highly orchestrated plan? Or had something far darker claimed her that day? Days later, Detective Hale received an anonymous tip. A video uploaded to a private cloud. It showed a figure in white walking calmly through the garden, the flames curling around her as if she was part of them. She turned to the camera, or maybe beyond it, and disappeared in a flash of light, leaving only smoke. Forensic analysis of the video yielded nothing. No edits, no tampering, no CGI. Experts were baffled. The footage was raw, authentic, and yet completely inexplicable. Hale considered every rational possibility. Accidental death? Abduction? Elaborate hoax? Nothing fit the evidence. Claire's parents were inconsolable. Every day brought a new theory, each stranger than the last. Daniel combed every corner of the estate, every street, every hotel, every hospital. Yet Claire was nowhere to be found. Friends and relatives began reporting sightings of a bride-like figure in distant locations, walking silently along the highway, appearing briefly in city parks, standing at the edge of forests. All accounts were fleeting and inconsistent. No one could approach her, and no communication was possible. 3 weeks after the disappearance, a letter arrived at Daniel's apartment. There was no return address. Inside was a single phrase, written in elegant, almost trembling script. The flame chooses. She walks between worlds now. Look closer. Confused and terrified, Daniel showed it to Detective Hale. Both were left with more questions than answers. Was Claire alive? Was she trapped somewhere? Or had she truly become part of something else entirely? Hale decided to re-examine the estate. On that fateful garden path, he discovered something new. Faint scorch patterns in the shape of footprints, leading not away from the garden, but circling in impossible angles, as if the fire itself had guided her somewhere beyond the physical world. Months passed, and Claire's disappearance became a legend whispered among those who attended the wedding. No one could explain how a bride could vanish in flames without a trace. Then, one evening, Daniel received a text from an unknown number. A photo of a woman in white standing in the distance, her face obscured by smoke. The message was empty, no words, and so the question lingers, one that haunts everyone who hears the story. Did the bride truly vanish, or is she walking between worlds, waiting to return? And if so, who or what is guiding her steps?